も火も
Closing out an iconic multi-game saga about god-slaying teenagers and giant sword continents takes immense ambition, but Monolith Soft is somehow diving right back into the deep end with Xenoblade Genesis. Rather than trying to awkwardly stretch the existing timeline like a piece of overused gum, this next chapter wipes the whiteboard clean with a standalone universe, fresh cast, and a brand new lore baseline built explicitly for next-gen Nintendo hardware. Anyone who spent 100 hours navigating the massive towering landscapes of past titles knows the studio's favorite pastime is forcing you to sprint across endless plains while hyper-leveled wildlife aggressively hunts you down for sport. Stepping away from the established multiverse gives the developers total freedom to reinvent their combat mechanics, move past the familiar blade-swapping routines, and build an environment so dense that taking in the view actually feels like a major event. We are looking at a complete fresh start for one of the most respected JRPG franchises in modern gaming, and while saying goodbye to old friends always stings a little, the promise of getting hopelessly lost in a massive uncharted world all over again is easily one of the most exciting propositions heading to the new console generation. Taking a sharp turn away from the usual brick-building formula, LEGO Batman Legacy of the Dark Knight injects genuine action game sauce into Gotham City by adopting a full-blown Arkham-inspired free-flow combat system. Developer Traveler's Tales swapped out their bloated roster of hundreds of background characters to focus on 7 tightly designed heroes and anti-heroes, giving players distinct combat styles whether you're whipping thugs as Catwoman, firing foam rounds as Commissioner Gordon, or chaining gadget combos as the Caped Crusader himself. Built on Unreal Engine 5, the open-world LEGO Gotham looks ridiculously atmospheric, blending moody rain-slicked asphalt and Gothic architecture with classic plastic brick detail in a way that feels like a love letter to decades of Dark Knight lore. Combat encourages you to mix batarangs, grapples, and environmental takedowns without feeling overly punishing for younger gamers, striking a fantastic balance between accessible fun and surprisingly stylish brawling. Having Batmite run the cosmetic shop to unlock classic suit variants from legendary comic runs and films gives completionists a hilarious reason to comb every alleyway. Combining tongue-in-cheek humor with legitimate rhythm-based beat-them-up mechanics proves you can take plastic minifigures seriously while still delivering an absolute banger of a Batman adventure. Slinging yourself off a brick wall at 70 miles an hour just to plant 2 oversized razor blades directly into the back of a giant naked guy's neck never really gets old, and Omega Force clearly knows it. With Attack on Titan 3, the studio is finally coming back to wrap up the entire anime storyline in one massive, chaotic action campaign. Anyone who played the previous games remembers that intoxicating feeling of mastering the omnidirectional mobility gear, feeling like an absolute superhero on caffeine right up until you miscalculate a turn and get swiped out of mid-air like a mildly annoying housefly. This third entry is not only retreading old ground, it's overhauling the momentum physics so swinging through ruined streets feels far more organic than magnetic. You get larger Titan hordes on screen at once, tighter squad command mechanics so your AI allies stop acting like Titan finger food, and a combat system that actually rewards precise angle management rather than blind button mashing. The real challenge lies in how they handle the later narrative-heavy arcs of the story, which trades simple monster hunts for complex political drama. Balancing heavy storytelling with high-flying dismemberment is a tightrope walk, but the sheer thrill of zipping across rooftops, lining up the perfect nape strike, and watching a 3-story monster collapse in real time remains an absolute rush. Fans have been waiting years for a proper, current-gen conclusion to this series, and provided the frame rate holds stable when 20 Titans crash through a city block. This is shaping up to be the ultimate airborne power fantasy we've been begging for. Kicking off Generation 10 by shipping trainers off to a massive, island-hopping archipelago inspired by Southeast Asia is the exact environmental reset the franchise desperately needed. Pokémon Winds and Waves takes full advantage of next-gen hardware to deliver a seamless tropical playground where diving below the ocean surface is not only a brief gimmick, it's a fully fledged underwater exploration layer packed with aquatic ecosystems and hidden deep-sea ruins. Choosing between a leaf-crowned sloth named Brout, a fiery little pup called Pombon, and a slick water lizard named Gekwa sets the tone for a journey that feels far more grounded in natural biodiversity than previous regions. Traversing across dynamic island clusters means sailing through heavy ocean storms, riding currents, and discovering isolated island biomes that force you to adapt your team strategy on the fly. Game Freak seems genuinely focused on making the world feel alive rather than static, filling the tropical canopy and coral reefs with wild Pokémon that interact with their surrounding environments in surprisingly believable ways. Hitting the 30-year anniversary mark with an ambitious ocean-heavy open-world adventure gives Gen 10 a distinct identity, offering both seasoned veterans and newcomers a gorgeous, sun-soaked frontier to conquer. Capcom finally pulled the tarp off a brand new mainline Onimusha, and rather than chasing the modern trend of turning every melee game into an agonizingly difficult stamina management simulator, they're sticking to their guns with pure cinematic swordplay. Onimusha Way of the Sword puts you in the sandals of legendary samurai Miyamoto Musashi, modeled after the icon Toshiro Mifune himself, as he carves through demon-infested Edo period Kyoto. Built on the RE engine, the game drops the classic fixed camera angles for an over-the-shoulder perspective, but the core soul-absorbing mechanics remain intact. That familiar demon gauntlet is back, hoovering up red souls for gear upgrades, yellow for health, and blue souls to power up supernatural Oni weapons. The real magic, though, is in the sword fighting itself. Rather than dodging around endlessly like a panicked rolling pin, combat centers on deliberate parries and blade steering that let you manipulate your enemy's balance, setting them up for the classic, ultra-satisfying break-Issen execution move. You can even flip furniture mid-fight to block incoming arrows or trap demon samurai against walls, adding a bit of creative bar brawl chaos to formal samurai duels. Capcom brought in actual historical swordsmen for the motion capture, so every stance and slash carries genuine weight, instead of looking like floaty anime magic. Walking into a quiet bamboo grove, waiting for a demon ninja to strike, and landing a frame-perfect counter-strike feels just as incredible now as it did back on hardware 2 decades ago. Bringing back a dormant franchise after 20 years is always a gamble, but by focusing on tight parry windows and stylish execution, rather than punishing deaths, this looks like the exact shot in the arm the samurai action genre desperately needed. Hexworks is taking a second swing at their dark fantasy universe with Lords of the Fallen 2, and they are doubling down on the one mechanic that genuinely set their reboot apart, seamlessly shifting between the living world of Axiom and the nightmare realm of Umbral. That dual realm mechanic was a brilliant concept in the first game, even when it occasionally turned simple platforming into a stressful headache, but the sequel is building on those foundations with much tighter technical optimization and smoother gameplay flow. Running on Unreal Engine 5, the visual design is ridiculously grim, packed with towering Gothic cathedrals, grotesque demon armor, and cosmic horror monstrosities waiting in the dark. The developers clearly listened to player feedback regarding enemy density and janky hitboxes, refining the stamina management and weapon weight so swinging a giant colossal sword feels devastatingly heavy without feeling unresponsive. Combat offers deeper build variety this time around, letting you blend holy magic, dark umbral spells, and heavy melee combos without feeling like you're gasping for stamina after 2 dodges. The real test for Hexworks will be balancing the umbral lamp puzzles so they feel like clever exploration tools rather than tedious chores, while a dozen undead archers shoot at you from off-screen. Expanding co-op features and refining the dark oppressive atmosphere makes this sequel look like a confident evolution rather than just a quick iteration. Anyone looking for a heavy, relentless Souls-like experience with a unique alternate dimension gimmick should keep a very close eye on this dark fantasy follow-up. Dropping Sora straight into a photorealistic Tokyo-inspired city called Quadratum is easily the wildest turn this series has taken since an anime boy first high-fived Donald Duck back in 2002. Tetsuya Nomura is essentially handing us a version of Sora who suddenly has to navigate city traffic, deal with modern apartment architecture, and do parkour off skyscrapers with a keyblade that doubles as a grapple hook. Visually, the engine upgrade gives combat a slick cinematic crunch, bringing back those beloved Kingdom Hearts 2 reaction commands where you seamlessly bounce off walls and leap onto boss attacks mid-combo. Meanwhile, classic squad mates Donald and Goofy are off playing interdimensional detectives to track down their lost Keyblade wielder, proving the Disney charm isn't going anywhere even as the aesthetic leans heavily into gritty urban fantasy. The addition of new scrap and build environmental mechanics means you're no longer just bashing Heartless in open arenas, you're actively tearing up urban terrain to reshape the battlefield on the fly. Balancing high-stakes urban action with existential light and darkness philosophy is classic Square Enix territory. And watching our favorite spiky-haired hero zip across glass building facades while preparing for the Lost Master arc looks like an absolute blast to play.
You are moving a weapon of war. The kind we deny.
Infinity Ward is taking the campaign back to grounded, high-stakes military chaos with Call of Duty Modern Warfare 4. Dropping players right into the middle of an explosive global conflict sparked on the Korean peninsula. Instead of jumping straight into super soldier sci-fi gadgets, the story split screens between Private Park, fighting through desperate frontline trench warfare in Korea, and Captain Price, operating as an off-the-books rogue in places like Paris, New York, and Mumbai. Gameplay-wise, they are finally ditching random hipfire bloom, giving gunplay that crisp, predictable precision competitive players have been begging for. Movement gets a subtle upgrade too, adding context-sensitive ledge hanging and pipe shimmying, so tactical flank routes feel a lot more dynamic. On top of the 12-core 6 vs 6 maps at launch, the star of the show for tactical fans might actually be the return of DMZ mode, which now features a full forward operating base where you customize loadouts, craft gear, and level up persistent operator trait trees before dropping into high-stakes extraction zones. The dynamic weather systems mean a sunny raid can suddenly devolve into a torrential downpour, wrecking your visibility and changing how you approach exfiltration. Modern Warfare entries always carry massive expectations, but by pairing a dark, grounded story campaign with meaningful mechanics over arbitrary gimmicks, Infinity Ward looks ready to deliver one of the tightest shooters in years.
I'm not loving the odds.
I've had worse.
Stepping into the shoes of a raw 26-year-old James Bond before he even gets his 00 clearance turns out to be the exact creative shot in the arm the spy genre desperately needed. Developer IO Interactive took everything they learned from mastering sandbox stealth and Hitman and applied it to an origin story where Bond relies just as much on improvisation and charm as he does on silenced pistols. Rather than dropping you in as an invincible superhero in a tuxedo, the campaign makes you feel like an ambitious recruit who still makes reckless mistakes, getting into bar brawls and using environment items or smooth talking to wriggle out of messy security checkpoints. Combat feels remarkably punchy with a counter-based parry system, and the game hits an awesome sweet spot where you start with non-lethal tactics until the situation escalates, at which point Q-branch gadgets like the high-tech Omega chronograph watch and heavy firepower take over, driving that heavily modified Aston Martin Valhalla across exotic global set pieces feels like playing through a big budget blockbuster, but the real genius is how missions let you alternate between brute force firefights, high society infiltration, and social deception. Watching a young hot-headed Bond earn his license to kill while learning the ropes under a skeptical MI6 makes for one of the most engaging single-player spy campaigns we've seen in over a decade.
The winner of which is granted one wish. Powerful fighters from across
Returning to the
land.
beloved universe of Three Houses with Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave is an absolute dream scenario for tactical RPG fans who miss the deep political intrigue and character drama of Fodland. Centered around the prestigious Heroic Games, a massive grand arena tournament where legendary warriors and grand tacticians assemble to test their martial skill and clashing ideals, the narrative framing creates a fresh, high-stakes backdrop for classic grid-based battles. Intelligent Systems leans heavily into personal unit relationships and tactical flexibility, forcing players to account for environmental terrain hazards, dynamic arena traps, and multi-stage battle objectives that go far beyond just wiping out every enemy commander on the board, building up your custom roster of gladiators, managing weapon durability, and balancing classroom-style training routines between major tournament rounds retains that addictive social management mechanic that made its predecessor such a massive time sink. Watching rival factions debate their philosophical worldviews in the combat ring gives every encounter actual emotional weight, instead of feeling like generic combat exercises. Throwing new combat arts and weapons synergies into the mix makes every tactical turn feel like a chess match where a single misplaced archer can ruin your entire strategy.
Long ago, there was a land called Hyrule, created by
Nintendo did the unthinkable by dropping a reveal trailer for a ground-up remake of The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time on Switch 2, and every gamer who grew up in the 90s collectively lost their minds, even if Nintendo played its cards notoriously close to the chest. Instead of giving us 10 minutes of sweeping gameplay or Link slicing up Stalfos in real time, the reveal trailer gave us zero actual gameplay footage, opting instead for a brief atmospheric narration over a beautifully rendered historical tapestry before fading into a single cinematic shot of a sleeping young Link with the Triforce mark glowing on his hand. That minute-long tease was practically a masterclass in minimalist hype, yet it was still more than enough to set the entire internet on fire because it confirmed the worst-kept secret in gaming. The holy grail of 3D action adventures is being reborn for a new generation. Shifting away from the painterly art direction of Breath of the Wild toward a slightly more realistic aesthetic, this Switch 2 exclusive is being pitched as a full top-to-bottom reimagining, leaving fans furiously debating whether we are looking at a faithful one-by-one dungeon reconstruction or a massive structural overhaul. Leaving the audience on a strict diet of pure speculation after a 60-second cinematic clip is classic Nintendo behavior. But even without a single frame of combat or exploration on display, knowing that Hyrule's greatest chapter is heading to Switch 2 makes this easily one of the most anticipated titles on the platform.
Outer heaven. He's taken command of this immense army.
Escaping the legacy hardware prison after nearly 20 years feels like a genuine historical event, and watching Metal Gear Solid 4 Guns of the Patriots run at a stable frame rate without melting a console power supply is enough to make any stealth fan shed a tear. Konami packed this second collection with the exact heavy hitters everyone begged for, placing Old Snake's tactical, nanomachine-fueled, crawling right alongside Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker, and the weirdly fantastic Game Boy Color title, Metal Gear Ghost Babel. Running around South America with an Octocamo suit that changes color every time you lean against a brick wall brings back that glorious, overly dramatic mid-2000s storytelling where 40-minute cutscenes were treated like prestigious art films. Peace Walker holds up remarkably well too, letting you manage Mother Base, recruit soldiers off the battlefield with Fulton balloons, and tackle co-op boss fights against giant nuclear tanks without handheld control limitations holding you back. Throw in the fully restored MGS4 database encyclopedia for anyone who wants to spend 3 hours reading about fictional PMC economics, and this package essentially rescues a massive chunk of stealth gaming history. Watching an elderly super soldier groan in back pain while sneaking past unmanned gecko robots never loses its charm, making this whole set a massive victory for game preservation.
What if Final Fantasy?
Scrubbing away a decade of mobile gacha mechanics and rebuilding a massive story as a full-blown single-player RPG sounds like a crazy gamble, but Final Fantasy Resonance turns out to be one of the prettiest surprises in years. By taking the expansive storyline of Brave Exvius and adapting it into Square Enix's legendary HD 2D art style, the game looks like a dream world where classic 90s pixel art meets modern lighting effects and dynamic battle cameras. Turn-based combat hits that perfect traditional flow, letting you combine physical strikes and elemental magic while summoning legendary visions of iconic heroes from across the entire franchise to turn the tide of difficult fights. Stripping out microtransactions entirely means every single hero unit, rare weapon, and tactical ability is earned purely through gameplay, exploration, and beating tough side bosses. Battles carry an energetic tempo because the dynamic camera swoops down during major boss encounters, giving classic sprite-based clashes the dramatic presentation of a big-budget cinematic. Taking a shuttered mobile game and transforming it into a premium, standalone adventure proves that deep turn-based RPG systems always shine brighter when they aren't trying to sell you virtual currency.
Facing a Tyranid splinter fleet. They engaged us on 2 planets.
wading through a sea of 20,000 screaming Tyrannid alien bugs as an 8-foot-tall armored space marine is the purest form of video game catharsis imaginable, and Space Marine 2 delivers that spectacle without a single second of restraint. Lieutenant Titus returns to the front lines with a roaring chainsword in one hand and a heavy bolt pistol in the other, turning swarming hordes into crimson paste in a glorious display of heavy metal carnage. Saber Interactive's proprietary engine pulls off mind-boggling scale, filling the horizon with literal waves of chittering monstrosities that spill over barricades like living liquid before slamming straight into your power armor. Cover systems don't exist here because your best defense is actively charging into the fray, ripping alien heads off with brutal execution finishers to instantly restore your armor shields mid-fight. Blending campaign missions with dedicated 3-player co-op operations means you and your squad can tackle grueling side objectives where weapon weight and tactical positioning genuinely matter, watching a giant Carnifex monster charge through a concrete wall only to get parried by a chainsword never gets old, delivering an unapologetically loud, visceral shooter that treats players' subtlety like a dirty word. Stepping out of the Imperial sewers and getting hit with that legendary view of Cyrodiil's lush green landscape remains one of the most iconic moments in gaming history, and Virtuos, along with Bethesda, gave it the massive Unreal Engine 5 coat of paint it truly deserved. The Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion Remastered doesn't try to reinvent the wheel, but it rebuilds the chassis. The infamous potato-faced NPCs of 2006 have been replaced with shockingly detailed character models. Ray-traced lighting makes the Eylead ruins look genuinely spooky, and the audio design has been overhauled so ambient forests actually sound alive. Best of all, they finally added a dedicated sprint button and smoothed out the leveling system. You no longer need a master's degree in applied mathematics just to optimize your character stats without accidentally ruining your build. The real charm, however, is that they preserved the gloriously unhinged Radiant AI interactions that made the original so meme-worthy. Guards will still yell at you for stealing a single piece of cheese, villagers still hold absurdly nonsensical conversations with each other on town paths, and the ragdoll physics still fling mud crabs across the map when you hit them with a warhammer. With both the Knights of the Nine and the legendary Shivering Isles expansions baked right into the package, heading back into the Daedric portals as the hero of Kvatch hits that exact sweet spot between pure 2000s nostalgia and modern quality of life polish. It proves that while Skyrim gets all the re-releases, Oblivion was always the eccentric middle child with the best quest writing in the whole family.
Okay everyone, thanks so much for watching. If you liked that video, please leave a like and subscribe, and ring the bell if you want to get notified when we release new content. We hope to see you in the next video.